Supporting role. I'm Scarlett Thorne, and I learned early that I wasn't meant to be the heroine of this story. Some people are born understanding their place in the world. I wasn't one of them. I had to learn it the hard way, over years of bitter lessons and small humiliations that accumulated like interest on a debt I never knew I'd taken out. Part 1. The perfect enemy. Evangeline Vale and I grew up in parallel worlds that should have been identical. Same absent parents, hers traveling for diplomatic work, mine building their empire across 3 continents. Same empty mansions on the same tree-lined street in the oldest, wealthiest part of the city. Same parade of nannies and tutors and drivers who knew our schedules better than our own parents did. Same everything. Except somewhere between our first piano recital and our high school graduation, Evangeline became the graceful swan everyone adored, while I remained the girl who tried too hard. She floated through rooms like she was born to them. I entered the same rooms and immediately started calculating angles, measuring distances, planning my approach. By the time we were 23, the pattern was set in stone. Evangeline was the golden girl, effortlessly elegant, genuinely kind, beloved by everyone who met her. And I was the girl who woke up each morning with my first thought being, how can I outshine her today? Tonight's jewelry gala was supposed to be my moment. Is less than #0. 3 is greater than. I'd spent 3 months planning it. The dress was custom Valentino, a deep emerald that made my skin glow and my dark hair look like silk. I'd lost 5 pounds. Had my makeup done by the artist who worked with actresses. Borrowed a necklace that cost more than most people's cars. Everything was perfect. Until Evangeline glided through the ballroom doors wearing the exact same dress. The same dress. I watched heads turn, watched the moment of confusion ripple through the crowd. Watched Evangeline's eyes find mine across the room. Watched her face do something complicated: surprise, dismay, and then something that looked almost like resigned amusement. Like she'd expected this. Like she was used to our lives colliding in the most inconvenient ways possible. The rage that filled me was clean and pure and years in the making. I smiled at her, bright, genuine, the smile I'd perfected in 1,000 mirrors. Waved her over to the champagne table where I stood with my second glass already in hand. The red wine was my 3rd drink, carefully chosen for maximum staining potential. Evangeline, I called, voice bright with false delight. Oh my God, I love your dress. She approached cautiously, reading something in my eyes that made her movements careful. Scarlett, you look, here, let me get you some wine, I interrupted, reaching for a glass. That's when I tripped. Is less than #0. 3 is greater than. It was beautifully executed. I'd been practicing versions of it for years. The stumble looked completely natural, the wine arcing through the air in a perfect crimson spray that caught the front of her dress, the skirt, even spattering her shoes. Evangeline gasped, staring down at the spreading stain. Oh no! I pressed my manicured fingers to my lips, eyes wide with horror. Oh, Evangeline, I'm so sorry. I'm such a klutz here, let me help. I reached for her with champagne-damp hands and she flinched back. It's fine, she said, voice tight. I need to go. She fled the ballroom and I watched her go with triumph singing in my veins. Then I turned back to the party, accepting sympathetic murmurs and reassurances from the crowd that had witnessed my accident. I was riding that high, that perfect vindictive pleasure, when I saw where Evangeline had gone. She'd crashed, literally crashed, stumbling on her wine-stained shoes directly into Dominic Ashford. And I watched, champagne frozen halfway to my lips, as his entire face changed. Dominic Ashford. 6'2" of old money elegance, sharp cheekbones, eyes the color of winter storms. Dominic, who'd been the most untouchable golden boy in our social circle since we were teenagers. Dominic, who I'd known since we were children, who treated me like a little sister, who I'd decided years ago would be mine because that's how the story should go. Is less than #0. 3 is greater than. Dominic, whose face had never ever looked the way it looked right now. His eyes softened, widened, came alive with something I'd never seen directed at anyone, least of all at me. Love at first sight. The phrase floated through my mind like a death knell. I stood there, champagne turning warm in my hand, watching him steady Evangeline with his hands on her shoulders. Watching him say something that made her laugh despite the ruined dress. Watching him shrug out of his jacket and drape it over her shoulders with a gentleness that made my chest hurt. So he wasn't the cold, untouchable golden boy everyone thought. He just had a poker face around everyone else. Around me. Dominic had everything: looks, money, talent, a business degree from Oxford, and a venture capital firm he'd started at 24 that was already legendary. He had connections that spanned continents, a family name that opened any door, and the kind of effortless charisma that made people want to follow him anywhere. He was supposed to be mine. That's how the story should go: me on his arm at these events, wearing his ring, basking in everyone's envy, while he looked at me the way he was looking at Evangeline right now. But Dominic had only ever seen me as a little sister. Which was fine. It meant we were close. It meant I had access, had his trust, had a place in his life that other women would kill for. Evangeline was just a distraction is less than #0. 3 is greater than. The novelty would wear off. It always did with men like Dominic. Except my private investigator, yes. I had a private investigator. Don't judge me, sent me photos over the next 2 weeks showing that they kept coincidentally running into each other. The coffee shop near her office. The bookstore in the arts district. The farmer's market at 7 in the morning. No coincidence. Dominic was interested. Actually, genuinely interested. I'd never seen him interested in anyone before. On Evangeline's birthday, I knew Dominic would deliver her gift personally. He was old-fashioned that way: gifts were handed over in person, preferably with some grand romantic gesture attached. So I engineered a fall right in front of his building, timing it perfectly so he'd find me on his way out. The twisted ankle was real enough. I'd practiced the fall a dozen times, knew exactly how to land to cause minimal actual damage while looking maximally pathetic. "Dom," I whimpered as he crouched beside me, genuine tears welling up because yes, it actually hurt. "Dom, it hurts." He sighed, exasperated and fond. "You're such a klutz, Scarlett. What were you even doing here?" "I was shopping," I lied smoothly. "I didn't know you'd be— oh God, I can't walk." I tried to stand, made a good show of collapsing back down with a cry of pain. He studied me for a long moment, and I wondered if he could see through it is less than #0. 3 is greater than. But then he sighed again and turned around, crouching down. "Come on," he said. "Piggyback." I climbed onto his back, arms around his neck, breathing in his cologne. This was good. This was intimate. This was the kind of scene that built relationships. Perfect. He carried me 6 blocks to my apartment building, and I made myself as light as possible, made small pained sounds at just the right intervals to remind him why he was doing this. "What's that you're holding so tight?" I asked, though I already knew. I'd seen the distinctive teal wrapping paper when he'd emerged from his building. "Just a gift," he said, and there was something in his voice, something warm and private that made my stomach clench. "For Evangeline." As he set me down outside my building, I caught movement in a window across the street. Evangeline's apartment. Her bedroom window specifically. She'd been watching. Had seen everything. The triumph was immediate and intoxicating. "Tell her happy birthday for me," I said sweetly, limping dramatically toward my door. But then I glanced back and saw Evangeline's silhouette in the window. Saw her door open. Saw her step out onto her balcony and look down at Dominic with an expression I couldn't quite read from this distance. And I watched, confusion replacing my triumph as she smiled at him. Warmly. Genuinely. Watched her gesture him up. Watched him disappear into her building without a backward glance at me. Wrong. This was all wrong. Pristine, perfect Evangeline should have slammed the door in his face. Should have been furious at seeing me draped all over him. Should have let jealousy or pride or simple hurt feelings win out. But she'd invited him in like nothing had happened. Like I didn't matter at all. Over the next few days, I waited for the relationship announcement. Waited for the Instagram posts, the society page mentions, the casual hand-holding in public that would signal they were official. Nothing came. Instead, I heard through my very efficient network of gossips that Dominic was drinking heavily. That his mood was terrible. That he'd snapped at his assistant and canceled 3 important meetings. My mood was excellent. Now I just had to position myself as his shoulder to cry on. Be there with sympathy and understanding, and maybe, finally, he'd see me as something other than his annoying little sister figure. But something felt off about the whole situation. For Dominic to be this devastated, Evangeline must have firmly, decisively rejected him. But why? And why so fast? They'd barely started whatever this was. I hadn't even deployed my best schemes yet. The ones I'd been planning for years, detailed in a private journal I kept locked in my safe, is less than #0. 3 is greater than. The strategic falls and convenient emergencies and carefully timed crises that would pull Dominic's attention away from any relationship he tried to build. Then Evangeline showed up at my door with homemade soup. We'd never been friendly, I'd made absolutely certain of that over the years. I'd hidden her performance dress before a major recital when we were 15. I'd accidentally destroyed love letters from a boy she'd liked when we were 17. I'd spread just enough rumors, caused just enough small disasters, to make sure we stayed in our separate lanes. Rivals, not friends. That was the deal. Yet here she was at 7 in the evening, holding a ceramic container of soup that smelled incredible, smiling at me with warm concern. "I heard about your ankle," she said. "I thought you might be tired of takeout." I stared at her, trying to find the angle, the trap, the poisoned apple hidden in this gesture. "That's thoughtful," I managed. "Can I come in? I'd love to catch up. We've been neighbors for so long and I feel like we barely know each other." She knew exactly how well we knew each other. She knew every small cruelty I'd inflicted over the years. This was something else. But I let her in because I needed to understand what she was playing at. She heated the soup, served it in my bowls, chatted about innocuous things, the weather, upcoming charity events, a new restaurant downtown is less than #0. 3 is greater than. Normal, pleasant conversation that felt completely surreal. I ate the soup because it was delicious, and because I was hungry, and because I still couldn't figure out her game. As I finished the last spoonful, I looked up and caught something in her eyes as she watched me. Disgust. Pure, undisguised, visceral disgust. It was there for just a heartbeat before she smoothed it away behind her pleasant smile. But I'd seen it. Evangeline had never looked at me like that before. Not when I'd ruined her dress at the gala. Not when I'd sabotaged her in 100 small ways over the years. She'd looked hurt, frustrated, even angry sometimes. But never disgusted. Never like I was something rotten she'd found under a rock. Something was very, very wrong with her. My stomach cramped violently. The pain was immediate and sharp, doubling me over in my chair. I tried to stand and my legs wouldn't hold me. The room tilted sideways and I heard myself cry out. Evangeline calmly pulled out her phone and called an ambulance. Her voice was steady, professional, giving my address and symptoms like she was ordering coffee. Then she crouched beside where I'd collapsed on my kitchen floor, and there was something almost clinical in how she watched me. "Is there someone I should contact?" she asked. "Maybe Sterling?" Sterling. Sterling Marks, who'd confessed his feelings for me 7 times over the past 5 years, is less than #0. 3 is greater than. Sterling, who I'd kept at arm's length because I'd been too focused on Dominic to notice what was right in front of me. No. Not Sterling. He didn't need to see me like this, weak and pathetic and possibly dying from soup my rival had brought me. "Dominic," I gasped. "Get Dominic." Something flickered across Evangeline's face. Disappointment? Frustration? She made the call. Part 2, the complication. The hospital determined the soup was fine, just my chronic gastritis flaring up from stress and too much champagne at the gala, and probably years of not taking care of myself properly. No poison. No sabotage. Just my own body betraying me. Dominic came anyway, leaving an important meeting early according to the breathless updates from his assistant that I heard over the phone. He strode into my room looking worried and exhausted, his tie loosened and his hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. Then he saw Evangeline sitting in the chair beside my bed and froze. "Evangeline," he breathed, and his whole voice changed. Went soft and careful and full of something that made my chest ache. "You're here too." She nodded, her expression completely neutral. "Cool." I burst into tears. Real ones this time, because the pain was real and the fear had been real, and now Dominic was here, but he was looking at her like that and I couldn't take it anymore, is less than #0. 3 is greater than. It hurts, I sobbed. "Dom, it hurts so much." He pulled his gaze away from Evangeline and came to my bedside, checking the chart the nurse had left hanging there. His frown eased as he read the diagnosis. "You'll be fine," he said, and there was relief in his voice, but also something else. "Distraction." He kept glancing at Evangeline. "You just need to take better care of yourself." I grabbed his hand, pressed my face to his stomach, let myself shake with sobs that were only half performed now. "I was so scared," I whispered. "I thought I didn't know what was happening." "Yes," Evangeline said from her chair, voice pleasant and mild. She's been quite uncomfortable. The pain must be significant. Dominic went rigid under my touch. His hand came up to pat my back absently, but his attention was completely focused on Evangeline now. I looked up at her through my tears and saw she wasn't watching Dominic at all. She was staring at the door with an expression of focused anticipation. That's when Sterling burst in, breathless and sweating despite the November cold. Sterling Marks. 6 feet of lean elegance, dark hair always perfectly styled, sharp suits that made him look like old money even though his family had earned every penny in the last generation. Sterling, who was usually composed and collected and smooth as glass. Except around me. Around me he lost his cool as less than #0. 3 is greater than, because he loved me. I'd known it since high school, since the day I'd defended him from 3 thugs who'd decided the quiet, wealthy transfer student would be an easy target. I'd been having the worst day of my teenage life. My parents had just spent an hour at dinner praising Evangeline's piano recital while barely mentioning my performance. I'd seen Dominic on a date with a senior girl, holding her hand, smiling at her. Everything felt wrong and sharp and painful. Those 3 idiots paid for my bad mood with bloody noses and bruised egos. Sterling had been devoted ever since. Following me around like a puppy, helping with homework, walking me home, confessing his feelings at regular intervals like he was following some predetermined schedule. I'd kept him at arm's length because I was focused on Dominic. Because Sterling felt safe and easy and therefore somehow less valuable. Because I was an idiot. Scarlett, he said now, taking in the scene me wrapped around Dominic, Evangeline sitting calm and separate in her chair. Thank God you're okay. Dominic extracted himself from my grip with visible effort. You take care of her, he said to Sterling, and there was something curt in his tone. Of course, Sterling replied, voice going cold in that way it did when he was hurt but trying to hide it. Then Evangeline spoke up, her voice bright and helpful. I can take turns caring for Scarlett too is less than #0. 3 is greater than. I have plenty of time in my schedule. The words hung in the air, and I watched Sterling's face close down completely. If Evangeline babysat me, she couldn't be with Dominic. It was perfect strategy, really. I almost admired it. But Sterling refused her immediately. No need. I'll handle it. Evangeline's face did something complicated, surprise, frustration, something darker underneath. Dominic looked furious, jaw clenched, eyes flashing. When Evangeline stood to leave a few minutes later, Dominic followed her out. I tried to follow too, Ivy be damned, but Sterling's hand closed around my wrist and held me in the bed. Why didn't you let her stay? I demanded, trying to pull free. It would have been what? Given you more chances to torment her? Sterling studied me with an expression I couldn't read. Don't. I'm afraid you'll drive yourself insane chasing ghosts. I'm not chasing anything. I was just, why did I even come, Scarlett? The question stopped me cold. What? Why do you think I'm here? His voice was patient, like he was talking to a child. Evangeline called Dominic first. He was already on his way when he contacted me and asked me to come. The information settled in my stomach like a stone. Dominic had rushed over because Evangeline had called him. Not because I needed him as less than #0. 3 is greater than, because she did. Everything else was just convenience. Part 3, the revelation. The next night, Dominic called me. My heart raced when I saw his name on my screen. He'd thought of me while drunk. This was it, the breakthrough moment where the alcohol lowered his defenses and he finally admitted, until I arrived at his penthouse and saw his phone screen covered in notifications. A dozen missed calls. All from me. All from an hour ago when I'd bombarded him with increasingly frantic messages about nothing in particular. He'd just hit redial by accident. The disappointment was crushing. But I sat down close to him anyway, poured myself a drink from his expensive whiskey, and took a photo when he wasn't looking. Me and Dominic, cozy in his apartment late at night. I sent it to Evangeline with a message, Dom's really drunk and kind of a mess. Wanna come get him? Her reply came back within seconds, ice cold, I'm busy. Busy. Right. Then, because she was apparently petty too, she sent a photo back. The lighting was dim, atmospheric, a high-end bar with velvet booth seats. And there, in profile, unmistakable even in the shadows, was Sterling. Sterling's secret bar. The Velvet Room. The place he'd shown me years ago, made me promise never to tell anyone about because it was his sanctuary when the world got too loud. How the fuck did she know about it is less than #0. 3# is greater than. I stared at the photo until my eyes burned, a terrible premonition growing in my chest. My photo would reach Sterling. He'd see me with Dominic, drunk and cozy, and after years of watching me chase another man, this would be the moment he gave up. Except Sterling had been disappointed in me 100 times already. This would just be one more. But adding Evangeline to the mix, Evangeline, who was beautiful and kind and everything I wasn't, that would change everything. Would they get together? The thought made something inside me crack. I shook Dominic awake, barely coherent myself now with alcohol and fear. Sterling and Evangeline, I said. What if they? Dominic blinked at me slowly, processing through the drunk haze. Then he sat up, suddenly more sober. Impossible, he said after a long silence. He was right. Sterling wouldn't end up with me. I'd made sure of that by pushing him away for years. But he couldn't end up with Evangeline either, because that would mean I'd lost both of them, and that was unacceptable. Damn, I heard myself say. Am I in love with Evangeline? The thought gave me nightmares for days afterward. Days later, Dominic's secretary arranged a meeting at his office. I arrived perfectly dressed, not trying too hard, just effortlessly elegant in theory, if not in execution. Dominic looked like he hadn't slept. There were shadows under his eyes and his usual polish was dimmed somehow. Is less than #0. 3# is greater than. Did anyone try to reach me that night? He asked without preamble. When I was drunk? Just me, I admitted. And I asked Evangeline to check on you. She said she was busy. He laughed, and it was the most bitter sound I'd ever heard from him. Why? I asked, genuinely confused now. You've loved her forever. Or at least for 3 weeks, which for you is basically forever. She's changed, Dominic said slowly, carefully, like he was trying to explain something he didn't fully understand. Everything about her feels different now. Like she's performing for an invisible audience. Like she's following some script only she can see and the rest of us are just props. I thought he was being dramatic. Overthinking it the way he overthought everything. You're such a scumbag, I said lightly. She finally gives you a chance and you're already finding reasons to pull away. He laughed again, face dropping into his hands. Yeah, the worst. But there was something haunted in his eyes that I couldn't quite dismiss. Part 4, the shift. Sterling noticed I was wearing someone else's cologne the next time we met. Whose is that? He asked, voice carefully neutral. A man's, I said, because I was feeling reckless and hurt and wanted someone else to hurt too. His neck veins pulsed, tendons standing out sharp against his skin. Is less than #0. 3# is greater than, but his face stayed calm, professionally pleasant. Something interesting happened, I said, smiling in a way I knew was cruel. Dominic and Evangeline might be breaking up. She turned him down. That's not good news for me, Sterling said, honest as always. But I agree she's changed somehow. I ran into her at the Velvet Room last week. My blood turned to ice. You were drinking with her? Tuscan, no. God, no. We just crossed paths in the hallway. I left immediately. He paused, something troubled in his expression. Though she said something strange before I went. Something about how this wasn't how the scene was supposed to go. I thought she was drunk. A chill ran down my spine, remembering what Dominic had said. Script. Performance. Scene. Date anyone you want, I heard myself say. Just not Evangeline. Neither scenario will happen, Sterling said, looking at me with steady certainty. You know I only want you. Then his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his entire face transformed, went warm and eager and lit from within. Evangeline, he answered. Everything inside me reversed. Every drop of blood, every breath, every thought. I bolted for the door and Sterling caught me in 3 strides, one hand around my wrist, the other holding up his phone screen for me to see. Is less than #0. 3# is greater than. Spam caller, the screen read. Suspected telemarketer. Not Evangeline. Not Evangeline at all. Why are you so nervous? Sterling asked softly, dangerously. Why would it matter if Evangeline called me? I'm not nervous. He laughed, eyes crinkling in genuine amusement. Then his face went serious in that way it did when he was about to say something I didn't want to hear. You don't like Dominic as much as you think you do, Sterling said. You barely spoke to him in middle school. You told me in college that he was too cold, too controlled, not your type at all. So why this sudden obsession after graduation? After Evangeline entered the picture. Because Dominic couldn't follow my logic. He was the one person in our circle who I couldn't predict, couldn't manipulate, couldn't control. He knew everything about me, had walked me home from school, knew about my period disasters and my insecurities and my failures. Except this. Except my feelings for him. Or what I'd convinced myself were feelings. Now Sterling was exposing my deepest secret, the one I'd barely admitted to myself. You want to know what I think? Sterling continued, relentless. I think you never actually wanted to date Dominic. I think you planned it all out when Evangeline and Dominic got together. You'd fall down the stairs on her birthday. Get kidnapped on their anniversary is less than #0. 3 is greater than. Cut your wrists at their engagement party. And Dominic would come running each time, leaving Evangeline standing alone in the cold. My breath stopped. He'd seen right through me. Seen the detailed fantasies I'd never shared with anyone. The elaborate scenarios I'd played out in my head late at night. You've imagined these scenes so vividly, Sterling said, voice going gentle now. But have you ever imagined actually dating him? Actually being in a relationship with Dominic Ashford? I hadn't. God, I hadn't. My feelings had peaked the moment I'd realized Dominic wanted Evangeline. Before that, he'd just been Dominic, familiar, safe, uninteresting. Fighting for what Evangeline had was programmed into my DNA at this point. If I'd chosen Evangeline last night, Sterling asked, voice dropping low and careful, if I'd said yes when she offered to help take care of you, would you have fought for me? Would you suddenly love me then? He was stripping me bare, exposing every ugly truth I'd spent years burying. I tried to flee again, but he blocked the door, crowded me back against the wall, not touching but close enough that I could feel the heat coming off him. I like you, Sterling said, and it was confession number 9. I've always liked you. Only you. I know, I whispered. So you're that confident. That sure I'll always be here waiting? But I can't be with you, I said desperately, searching for any excuse is less than #0. 3 is greater than. After chasing Dominic so publicly, after making such a fool of myself, agreeing to date you would make me look even worse. Like I'm settling. Like you're the consolation prize. Sterling froze. His jaw worked like he was grinding his teeth. I never thought you were, he stopped. Swallowed hard. Couldn't make himself say whatever word had been on his tongue. Then Evangeline called. Actually called this time, not a spam number. I put it on speaker without thinking, some self-destructive impulse making me want witnesses to whatever disaster was coming. Scarlett, Evangeline said, voice warm and bright and terrifying in its cheerfulness. I wanted to let you know Dominic and I are getting engaged. The words didn't make sense. What? That's so sudden. Is it? She laughed, and it sounded wrong somehow. Off-key. Actually, no, it makes perfect sense. Want to know why? I waited, throat tight. Because the male lead is supposed to end up with the female lead, Evangeline said, like she was explaining something obvious to a child. That's how these things work, isn't it? That's how the story goes. The line went dead. Sterling snatched my phone, staring at it with an expression of deep concern. Part 5, the truth I don't understand, I told Sterling. My voice sounded small and lost even to my own ears is less than #0. 3 is greater than. You don't need to, he said firmly, pulling me toward the door. Come on. I'm feeding you. Where are we going? Anywhere but here. And if you ditch me for Dominic during this meal, you owe me $100,000. I blinked at him. Why? You'll ruin my appetite. Do you know how much I hate eating alone after looking forward to eating with you? Fine. Same penalty if you go chasing after someone else's fiancé. As we walked to his car, memories started surfacing. Small things I'd dismissed at the time but now seemed significant. Sterling calling about crashing his car right before I'd planned to visit Dominic's office. Sterling getting tickets to a show I'd mentioned wanting to see the day I'd meant to attend Dominic's gallery opening. Sterling burning his hand badly enough to need the ER minutes before I was supposed to meet Dominic for coffee. Every accident had kept me from Dominic. Had kept me with Sterling instead. You know, Sterling said softly as he opened the car door for me, I've never wanted you to go to him. I've done everything I could think of to keep you with me. Short of locking you up or begging, which seemed counterproductive. I'm thinking about food, I lied. No, you're thinking about how your parents knew about Evangeline's engagement before anyone else. You're thinking about how they probably helped arrange it is less than #0. 3 is greater than, about what that means. He could always read me like this. It was infuriating. They brought Evangeline around when you were kids because they thought you needed a playmate, Sterling continued, navigating through downtown traffic with easy confidence. All those double gifts, the extra attention to her it was because she was the neighbor's kid and they were being polite. They praised her to motivate you, make you competitive. But your parents only love you, Scarlett. They're just terrible at showing it. And so do I. Confession number 10. Sterling, I said, throat tight. I'm hungry. I know. I'll feed you. We found Dominic's car parked outside the restaurant. Of course we did. The universe had a sick sense of humor. He got out when he saw us, called me over with a gesture. Sterling's grip on my wrist tightened. 100,000, Scarlett. Remember, this is different, I started to say, but Sterling just raised an eyebrow. Dominic looked exhausted up close. Worse than before. I'm not making you their bridesmaid, am I? Sterling asked him bluntly. That would be cruel even by your standards. Opposite, Dominic said shortly. If Evangeline asks, refuse her. Please. Why would she ask? Because I'm clearly insane, Dominic snapped. Because nothing about this situation makes any sense is less than #0. 3 is greater than. Because Evangeline showed up at my apartment yesterday and proposed to me using a ring that belonged to my grandmother. A ring I didn't know she had access to and kept talking about how this was supposed to happen now, and asking if I remembered things that haven't occurred yet. She's either having a breakdown or I am. Sterling and I exchanged glances. Don't be her bridesmaid, Dominic said directly to me. Your obsession is public knowledge. Being in their wedding party would make you a laughingstock. And he stopped. I don't want that for you. There was real concern in his eyes. Brotherly concern. That's all it had ever been. Part 6. The wedding. Evangeline asked me to be her maid of honor 3 days later. I said yes immediately. Sterling tried to talk me out of it. Spent an hour listing all the reasons it was a terrible idea, all the ways I'd be humiliated, all the social damage it would cause. I listened patiently and then told him I was doing it anyway. Why? He demanded. Because I genuinely hope they get married, I said, and meant it. He studied my face for a long moment. Why? Because I don't like Dominic anymore. Not that way. And not even a little. How could I? I met his eyes steadily. He's getting married. To someone else. It's over. Sterling's face did something complicated. Relief and joy and barely suppressed hope, all fighting for dominance, is less than #0. 3 is greater than. So can you start liking me now? He asked, trying for casual and landing somewhere around desperate. $100,000, I said. Deal. Done. I'll write you a check right now. I laughed despite everything. That's not how this works. But he was already pulling out his phone, already transferring money to my account with shaking fingers, and I realized he was serious. He was completely, utterly serious. When Evangeline took me wedding dress shopping, she kept mentioning intimate details about her relationship with Dominic. The expensive jewelry he'd bought her. How they'd stayed up drinking until dawn talking about their future. The way he kissed her first thing every morning. Each detail was clearly meant to hurt me. To twist the knife and make me jealous and angry and bitter. I felt nothing. Not jealousy. Not anger. Just empty, distant calm, like I was watching a movie about people I used to know. Dominic really is a good man, I told her sincerely. You'll be very happy together. Evangeline froze with a dress halfway off the rack. Aren't you sad at all? She asked, turning to face me. Don't you feel anything? I feel terrible about this, Scarlett. I really do. Make the maid of honor payment really generous and we'll call it even. Then Dominic called her phone is less than #0. 3 is greater than. I watched her face go pale as she answered, watched her knuckles turn white around the device. The conversation was short. Tense. When she hung up, she looked like she might shatter. Scarlett Thorne. She spun on me, composure cracking like ice. Did you sabotage me to Dominic? What did you say to him? He wants to call off the engagement. I stood frozen, genuinely speechless. Even if Dominic doesn't marry me, she hissed, getting in my face now, you'll never have him. You'll only ever be the pathetic girl begging for scraps while you string Sterling along as your backup plan. The mention of Sterling snapped something in me. Leave him out of this, I said, voice low and dangerous. Why? It's true, isn't it? Poor Sterling, waiting around for years while you chase a man who doesn't want you. Sterling has never been a bargaining chip between us. I cut her off. He's never been part of whatever sick game you think we're playing. She stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. And I saw it, then really saw it. The same darkness that lived in me. The same calculating cruelty. The same desperate need to win at any cost. When Dominic had said she'd changed, I hadn't believed him. Now I saw it clearly. But unlike Dominic, I wasn't intrigued or disturbed by the change. I'd simply lost all interest. She looked at me strangely then, frustrated and confused, like I'd missed a crucial cue in a play she was directing as less than -0. 3 is greater than. This isn't how it's supposed to go, she muttered. She really did seem like a protagonist. The heroine of her own story, following some predetermined arc that only she could see. And I'd long accepted being the villain of mine. But maybe I didn't have to be. Part 7, The Choice. When I told Sterling about the dress shop confrontation, he listened patiently to every word. Didn't interrupt, didn't offer advice, just listened with his full attention the way he always did. How do you feel about all of it? He asked when I finished. Honestly, it's all pretty tragic. Marriage is serious, Sterling said, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear with careful gentleness. Let's not be like them, changing our minds constantly, playing games, chasing the wrong people. Are we getting married? Sterling smiled, slow and warm and certain. If you're asking, then I accept. I didn't, you trapped me. I've been trying to trap you for 8 years. It's about time it worked. People will laugh at you, I warned, because I needed him to understand. Everyone knows I chased Dominic. They'll say you're my consolation prize, my backup plan, they laugh more at people who commit without meaning it, Sterling interrupted. They laugh at broken engagements and bitter divorces, and people who marry the wrong person because they're too proud to admit they made a mistake is less than -0. 3 is greater than. They'll laugh at us for a few weeks and then they'll move on to the next scandal. I can handle a few weeks of gossip if it means the rest of my life with you. He made it sound so simple. So obvious. Maybe it was. When we announced our engagement at a small dinner with close friends, Dominic was among the shocked faces. How is it, Sterling? He asked me later, pulling me aside while Sterling was distracted by well-wishers. Who should it be? He shook his head slowly. I have no right to guess. I want to make sure you're not forcing yourself into something because you think it's what you should do. Because I rejected you. Because of pride or shame, or what about Evangeline? I interrupted. What happened with the engagement? She came to see me one last time, Dominic said, voice going flat and distant. Tried to, he stopped, looking exhausted and older than his years. It doesn't matter. She kept talking about things that hadn't happened yet, asking if I remembered events from next month. Specific conversations we supposedly had. She seemed convinced we were following some predetermined script and I'd just forgotten my lines. He rubbed his face roughly. I suggested she see someone. A therapist, a doctor, someone. She called me an NPC, a non-player character. Like I'm just a prop and her story is less than -0. 3 is greater than. He laughed without any humor. Whatever we had or could have had, it's over. I'm leaving for the London office next month. Clean slate. Fresh start. Something in his eyes looked relieved, like he'd woken from a strange and unsettling dream. Good luck, I said, and genuinely meant it. He smiled, truly smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from him in weeks. Congratulations, Scarlett. I think you've figured something out that I'm still learning. What's that? How to choose what's real over what you think you're supposed to want. His words stayed with me for days. Epilogue, the beginning 10 years earlier. The classroom was too hot and Scarlett's head was heavy on her desk. She'd been up until 3 a.m. trying to finish her essay and had ultimately given up, deciding sleep was more important than a passing grade. Sterling stopped at her desk during homework collection, his expression unreadable. I didn't bring my essay, Scarlett admitted, not bothering to lift her head. Sterling was quiet for a long moment. Then I wrote too. I'll copy your handwriting during lunch. She sat up, squinting at him. Won't that be really obvious? I'll be careful. I've been studying your handwriting since September. Scarlett grinned despite her exhaustion. That's kind of creepy but also incredibly useful. I'll buy you coffee after school is less than #0. 3 is greater than. Walk home with me instead? We live in opposite directions. Actually, my family just bought a house near yours. We're moving next week. Scarlett studied him with new interest. That's convenient. I thought so. After school, Sterling fell into step beside her, one hand lightly catching the strap of her backpack as they navigated the crowded hallways. The touch was casual but deliberate, keeping her close as bodies pressed around them. Someone brushed past Scarlett, deliberately bumping her shoulder. She recognized him senior year, cold eyes, the kind of beautiful that made people forgive bad behavior. Dinner tomorrow, Dominic Ashford said flatly, barely slowing. Grandmother's house. In fine, Scarlett answered, just as flat. He disappeared into the crowd without another word. That's Dominic Ashford, Sterling noted, watching him go. Senior FCOST. Top of his class. You know him. Oh, half the girls in our grade pump me for information about him since they found out we're in the same chess club. They seem to think I'm his friend. Are you? We've played chess twice. I wouldn't call us friends. End quote, Scarlett shrugged. He's Dominic. Looks good on paper, terrible personality. Bad investment all around. Sterling laughed, surprised and genuine. You're the first person I've heard say that is less than #0. 3 is greater than. We go way back. When we were 8, I grabbed him before he fell down a flight of marble stairs at some charity gala. He probably would have died or at least broken his neck. Life or death friendship established. Then we have one too, Sterling said. How do you figure? You defended me from those guys last week. Life or death situation. That wasn't life or death. They were just stupid and mean. You broke one guy's nose. I'm pretty sure that counts. Is this your way of saying you owe me? Scarlett asked, amused. It's my way of saying I like you. She stopped walking, surprised. We're 16. Isn't it too early to be thinking about dating? Sterling's eyes flickered with something she couldn't quite read. I'm not asking you to date me. I'm just stating a fact. I like you. I'm probably going to keep liking you. Thought you should know. End quote. Oddly straightforward. I don't believe in playing games. Life's too short. They started walking again, and Scarlett found herself thinking about his words long after they'd parted ways at her front gate. Later that week, when she showed up at Dominic's grandmother's house for the obligatory dinner, Dominic was waiting in the foyer looking suspicious. Are you seeing someone? He demanded. Scarlett blinked is less than #0. 3 is greater than. In your dreams. There's a guy walking you home. I've seen you with him 3 times this week. So? We're friends. Focus on school. Don't get distracted by boys. You're literally on a date right now, Scarlett pointed out, gesturing to the sophisticated-looking college girl waiting in the sitting room. That's different. I'm older. By 3 years. Focus on school, he repeated stubbornly. Boys are trouble. Scarlett texted Sterling afterward. My annoying older brother figure is threatening to tell my parents I have a boyfriend. Sterling's response came immediately. Does he know I already talked to your parents when I walk you home? They gave me cookies yesterday. Your mom thinks I'm such a nice young man. Scarlett stared at her phone, something warm and unfamiliar spreading through her chest. She texted back, You're the worst. I'm really not, he replied. But you'll figure that out eventually. And looking back years later, Scarlett realized that was the moment. Not some grand romantic gesture or dramatic confession. Just Sterling being honest and patient and absolutely certain about what he wanted, even when she wasn't ready to see it yet. She'd probably been falling for him from that first day. The day she'd defended him from bullies and he'd looked at her like she'd hung the moon. But there was no rush is less than #0. 3 is greater than. They had time. They had all the time in the world. Coda 5 years after the wedding. The charity gala was one I couldn't avoid. Sterling's company was one of the primary sponsors, and as his wife, I was expected to make an appearance, smile for photos, make small talk with the city's elite. I'd gotten better at these events over the years. Less calculating, more genuine. Or maybe I'd just stopped caring what people thought of me enough to relax into myself. I was laughing at something Sterling had whispered in my ear when I felt eyes on me across the room. Evangeline. She looked exactly the same, ageless and perfect in a silver gown that probably cost more than some people's cars. But there was something different in her expression as she studied me. Something uncertain. She approached slowly, carefully, like I was a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. "Scarlett," she said. "You look happy." "I am." She glanced at Sterling, who was at the bar getting us drinks, then back at me. Her forehead creased slightly. "This wasn't," she stopped. "Tried again. You weren't supposed to end up content. That's not how your arc goes. You're supposed to be bitter and alone and still pining for what you couldn't have." I smiled. It wasn't kind, but it wasn't cruel either. It was just honest. "Wrong book," I said. Her eyes widened, just slightly is less than #0. 3 is greater than, a flicker of recognition or maybe just confusion. Then she recovered, laughed it off like I'd made a joke she didn't quite get, and drifted away into the crowd of admirers who always seemed to surround her. I watched her go, feeling nothing but mild, distant curiosity. Like watching a character in a show I'd stopped following years ago. Wondering vaguely how the plot turned out, but not invested enough to actually check. Sterling returned with champagne, following my gaze to where Evangeline was holding court near the auction displays. "Everything okay?" "Tenor," he asked. "Everything's exactly right," I said, and realized with quiet shock that I meant it. Not because I'd won some competition. Not because I'd proven something or claimed some prize or finally gotten revenge on everyone who doubted me. But because for the first time in my life I wasn't performing. Wasn't following some invisible script about who I was supposed to be or what I was supposed to want. Wasn't fighting for someone else's spotlight just because they had it and I didn't. I was just here. Real. Whole. Mine. Sterling kissed my temple, his hand warm and solid on my waist. "What are you thinking about?" "How lucky I am," I said slowly, "that I learned to stop chasing the wrong story." He smiled, understanding without needing explanation. That was Sterling. He'd always understood me better than I understood myself, is less than #0. 3 is greater than. And somewhere across the room, Evangeline was already charming someone new, spinning her protagonist magic, living her main character life in whatever strange narrative she'd constructed for herself. I hoped she found her way out of it eventually. Hoped she found whatever real meant for her. But I'd stopped being her supporting role a long time ago. I'd walked off the page entirely. Found my own story. Wrote my own ending. And it was better than anything I could have scripted for myself back when I was still trying to steal someone else's plot. Sterling squeezed my hand, and I squeezed back, and we turned away from the past together. Toward the rest of our lives. Toward home. The end.